All right. Good afternoon. We're going to do two things today. The first part, I'm just going to go over the quiz 2 that I'm almost finished quiz 1 marking. Oh, it was painful for you and me. But I'm going to go over what quiz 2 is. I'm trying to make it a little bit easier for all of us. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see that one. And so here we've got, let me just get the chat up here so I don't miss any chat things. Here you can see that, oh, and that's not what I wanted to show on that side. Okay. If you go into the system, if you go to content, let me just put that over there. And you go down here to quizzes and final exam sort of thing. The final exam will appear by the end of the week as well. And you can go to quiz 2, but quiz 2 is over here. Move it. Apparently it doesn't move. There we go. And so with quiz 2, there's only 3 questions and they're pretty straightforward. Question 1, I just want you to find 3 papers on the topic of using cloud AI services. So I don't want you to repeat anything that I put in any of the learning modules. And I want you to use references in the IEEE type style. It's explained in this link. The link is pretty good in that it shows everything about, like, if you want, if it's a book or it's an article in a journal or it's a newspaper article or whatever, or website article, I'd like you to get, try to find papers that are a little bit more academic. So not just, when I don't want to see advertising stuff, you know, like from the services, I want to see papers that are discussing using AI services on the cloud. So you probably want to, you know, look at things where you can actually find scholarly papers or at least articles that are in depth about those services. And so all you have to do is provide the reference and given in the right format, and then a 1-sentence summary of what it's about. Right, so you know, like that summary could be something like, this is talking about AWS's machine intelligence or deep learning service, and you know, for training your own deep learning networks or something like that. You know, like that's what I want, 1 sentence. Question 2, I want you to find 3 newspaper articles, or, well, news articles, not newspaper, news articles, so that could be anything online, on security issues with or inside the cloud or whatever. Don't repeat any of the articles that are in the learning modules, obviously, and provide a link to each of these articles. And once again, 1-sentence summary of the security issue. You know, so was it a case of someone misconfiguring S3 buckets? Was it a denial of service attack against the network of a major cloud provider? You know, those sorts of things. Was it a rootkit attack on VMs that people had on a particular service? Those sorts of things. So find those. And then question 3, this is the only one where you actually have to do any writing. The other ones are just find the articles and do 1 sentence. So there's 3 sentences for question 1, 3 sentences for question 2. And all I want here, I don't need a reference, I need a link in question 2. Question 3, what is edge computing and why is it an important topic in cloud computing? I want you to restrict your answer to 400 words or less and reference where you got your information. Someone asked for this too. How do you do the references? Use this referencing system that you used for question 1. So, you know, do that. And I just want to know what it is and why it's important. There's lots of articles out there that describe what edge computing is. There's lots of articles out there with people that have their opinions on whether it's important or not, or whether it's going to be really prevalent in the near term or far term. So there's lots of things out there on edge computing. So I want you to look at that topic. What are you going to do? You're going to put all of your answers, okay, in a single document and put each question on a separate page. And at the top, put the title question 1, and then your 3 references. And then on the next page, question 2, your 3 links to articles with those having summaries. And then next page, question 3, and you have your answer about edge computing. I don't care how you are doing that, whether you're doing it in Word or whatever, I don't care. But make a PDF of that and put it in the Dropbox. And if you go up to the Dropbox on CourseLink, you will see I have opened up quiz 2. You can submit to that, and it's due midnight, November 18th. So you have till November 18th to do it. That was when the quiz was going to be. You have any time up into that time at midnight, so even longer than if you had done it during the day, to submit it. That is the second quiz. So you now have everything that you're going to do for the course except the final exam. And as I said, the final exam I'm going to be posting on CourseLink by the end of the week. Now that might include Saturday and Sunday, but I'm going to try to get it up as soon as possible. It's actually 1 question, and it's a take home. And I put the date there. It was, I think I said December 7th. Once again, you put it in Dropbox. I'll put the instructions, but it's basically, you're going to put it in 1 document. You're going to put that document in Dropbox, in the appropriate one, in the final exam one, and that's it. I've given you to December 7th, which is during I think that's the first week of the exams. If for some reason you need longer, I don't think you should. I think you can get rid of it by the end of the semester. Then let me know. But I'm with everybody else. I'm going to be looking for those documents in Dropbox by the 7th. I'll also have, if people want to, me to mark it earlier, I can do that. But once I mark it, that's it. It's not like you can get a freebie. I can mark it and then you can ask me to mark it again after you revise it. No, you get 1 chance to do that. But some people might want to just get everything out of the way and know what their mark is. That's fine. But anyway, so that's for so you have all the assignments. You have 3 and 4 have been posted. You've got the second quiz, and by the end of the week, you'll have the exam. So for quiz 2, to be honest, I think it's going to take you an hour or less to do that. It's not that strenuous, but I would like people to try to find some good articles for all of that, and have a think about what you find about edge computing, and don't just take the first explanation for edge that you find. Look at a few different explanations. Look at the source that you're getting this information from. Is it a particular provider? Is it someone commenting on it? Who are they? If they're just they're commenting on it, do they write for a technical a journal or news site or whatever? Is it someone's just personal opinion? Is it something from Microsoft or Amazon or Google or whatever? Just think about that when you look at it and come up with your short explanation of what it is, and have a good think about why it could be important or not. Is this overblown? Where is it going? So have a good think about that. And like I said, not very long, less, 400 words or less. That's not even a page. So really, so just do that. And, like I'd say, it really is going to take you an hour. If you're slow at writing, maybe another hour and a half or something like that. But please get it out of the way. Do it, when you have a spare afternoon and you're thinking, what shall I do? Do the quiz and get it out of the way by November 18th. Do I have any questions about the any of the evaluations? I'm hearing nothing. Oh, I will also, by the end of the week, also post, I will let everybody, after they have gotten their marks back for the assignments, once the assignments have been marked. And thank you for everybody for signing up. I think I've got, how many do I have? Let me see, 54 of you, I think, have signed up. So that means there's 4 of you that haven't signed up for marking time. Oh, how is A3 being evaluated? Yeah, once again, that's going to be, you're going to demo it to Marshall, and I will post the grading for that as soon as possible, so that you can, and I'll start putting up times for A3 to be evaluated. With A4, I'm going to have you just submit it to, I don't know whether I'll get it repo or maybe I'll just get it in let's see. No, it'll be in A4 repo. So with that one, I'll see. I might get a demo for that. I might not. But let me have a think about that. But A3, that'll be something you're going to demonstrate to Marshall after you've posted everything in the repo, and we'll set up times for that. That's going to actually be quicker than what you are doing for A2. So I'll probably set up 10-minute times. I've set up 15 minutes for you right now. I think I need to set up 10-minute ones, and those will start right after the A2 marking. So whenever you have A3 done, you can sign up for a time and get it evaluated. And I'll put, like I said, I'll put the marking scheme up in a day or so. I'll do that. And I'll do that for A4 as well. Anything else? Nobody? Okay. What I'm going to do now is for the last part of the time we have, I want to talk about ethics in the cloud. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to, once again, let me see, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? I'm going to share my screen. But I'm going to ask you to do something different. Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, so I know you're just seeing the, let me get, oh, there you are. There's everybody's lovely face over here. So I can see it. I want to get the chat. Okay, but what I would like to do, actually, I'll just put this over here so you can see it. Okay, what I'd like you to do is, if you feel comfortable, I would like you to share, like, turn on your cameras, turn on your mics, because I want to have a discussion. So if you don't feel comfortable, I'd like to see what you look like, actually. I only know what some of you look like. But what I want to do is that I want to talk about ethics in the cloud. And I want you guys to unmute. If you don't want to show yourself, that's fine. I can live with that. But what I want you to do is I want you to actually participate in this, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose 3 questions, and I'd like you to discuss what you think the answer to the 3 questions is, not what I think they are. So the first one is, we looked at on Monday the different AI services that are in the cloud, and I went over some of the problems that you have with them. So what I want to do is I want you to tell me what you think the criteria should be if you want to decide to include this type of software, the face recognition, the image recognition, the object recognition, the tagging, the subtitling, all of these different things. What do you actually think the criteria should be for you to decide what questions would you be asking yourself, or would you be asking others about these black box systems? And when you want to contribute, just unmic and pardon me, unmute and give us your opinion.
Because of the cost, wouldn't the first thing you probably want to think about is it worth even implementing? Like, is it going to bring a big benefit to either the end user or even to like the system itself to actually add in, say, like subtitling or image recognition, etc.? Or can the product function without it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I think you're probably going to find that every time you think about using the cloud, that's one of the first things you're going to think of is, does what you get from it warrant the cost? Does the cost make sense? What else would you be thinking of? Anything, just don't worry. There's no correct answer. I just want to know, what are some of the things you'd be thinking about? You know, you're going to put some AI system in. What would you be asking yourself?
Maybe something around data sensitivity, like if you're going to be using facial recognition software, where is that data being stored? You might want to think about that.
Yeah, data issues are really important. And that's actually a really good point, because people are really sensitive about what you use their data for. I think, did people see that there was an article, I think last week, in some of the newspapers and on TV about, there was, I think Cadillac Fairview malls were collecting images of people in the mall without telling people they were doing this. And it's, you know, like, and why they were doing it. And their explanation was they were collecting the images so that they could figure out the demographics of people that were shopping in the mall. So, you know, you have that. This is a very good part, Jeevan, that you brought up, is that what are you going to use? Where are you going to store the data, the security of it, you know, and the sensitivity of using that data, and how you're going to get consent. How do you get people to consent when you do things like facial recognition or image, you know, where you're using images to try to identify people, either who they are or what type they are? That's what the mall owners said they were doing. They were just looking at what type of people were shopping there. What other things would you be thinking about?
I said it in the chat, but GDPR, if you're working with European citizens.
Right. Yeah, that's yeah, sorry, I had it over on my smaller screen and I didn't see that. But yeah, GDPR is very important, because not just because it's used in Europe, which is true. If you have an international application, then you have to worry about GDPR, and then you have to worry about where it's stored. That's a very good point to bring up, because especially with cloud, and you can store it all over the place, then you do have to worry about what you're doing with European citizens, because it comes under GDPR. But you also have to keep thinking about that in the future, because a lot of people, like a lot of countries, are looking at GDPR and probably will come up with similar type regulations. So that's actually good. Oh, great. Warren posted a link to the Cadillac Fairview. And there's a question there. There's 5 million images. Seems like it's a lot, but, you know, probably in the grand scheme of things, obviously, there's billions of images that are on Google or Amazon or anything like that. But 5 million, when you think of it, it was just a fairly small collection of malls. But you know, that's actually a question too, when you're thinking about size and impact and reach. So we've got, you know, the comment about GDPR, where you're thinking about what happens when you're storing European data, but then you also have the question about, well, just collecting data at all. One of the things I think they were claiming in that case with the Cadillac Fairview is that they weren't storing the images. Right. But I mean, obviously they store them for some time, but what time is good? Like if they stored it for a day, is that too long? If they stored it for the time it took to analyze it, is that too long? How do you know if they stored it or not, besides them telling you they didn't store it? So, you know, those are all things you have to think about if you're designing a system. Should you in fact store anything that you're working on, or just store the results? How do you prove? How do you prove to people that you've done this? How do you actually get their permission? These are all good. What other things would you be looking at? Think about here. Let's think of an example. One of the things they have for some of these services is that they can do language translation, right? So you've got well, let's say you know, you've got a presentation and you've got it in English, and you want to then turn that into French. Or you've got a website that's in English and you want to create that website you want to translate it into French. Or Spanish or Italian or whatever, Chinese or Arabic. And there are services that you can get on the cloud from many cloud systems that will translate languages for you. So what are some of the questions you should ask yourself if you were going to think about doing that? Does it seem like a good idea? Instead of having to pay a very expensive translator to get all your to go through your website and translate everything into another language. That's a fairly significant cost.
I mean, I guess the accuracy is a concern, especially for like in Canada, where you need to have like French language as well as English, and it's expected that the French language is just as accurate and comprehensive as the English language.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Accuracy for a lot of these systems is a big problem. So while, like, let's say the translation systems are not bad, they probably don't come up to the standards, let's say, that a government website, Carolyn mentioned that, you know, in Canada, a lot of times you have to have a English and French site. And the thing is that it's not, you know, like they don't really want one of them to, you know, to be in a very poor version of the language with really, you know, mistakes or, you know, like awkward statements. It should sound like a native speaker produce that site. And in fact, when it is a government site, that's why a lot of times there's a lag in various sites going up, because they are waiting for the translation for that, and it takes a long time and it's expensive. So if you think, well, I'm going to get around that by using one of these services, just how good is it? And would you know? Right? I had this lovely case where I had a student that people were proposing projects for this course, and one of the projects that a student proposed was that he would do a translation system between English and Chinese. And I asked him, how would I know if it was right? Right? You know, like he could tell me, but the thing was that I had no way to be, you know, honestly, to mark that without getting somebody who was a Chinese speaker to tell me. I couldn't evaluate it. So, you know, the thing is that, yeah, someone, Isaac put up, yeah, when the government gets a translation, it's a big deal because they want it to be correct. And one of the things is, how do you test these things? So if you go to a site and say, oh yeah, I'll just flip on the translate to French part, unless you're a French speaker, you know, and a good French speaker, you're not going to be able to make that assessment that it's actually translating correctly. And while those systems are not bad, they're certainly not up to the level that they're used by governments or, you know, by anybody that actually cares about what the translation is. If it doesn't look like English, it's close enough. That's quite true. And for a lot of ones, it would be, yeah, like, you know, it looks like it might be in Chinese, but, you know, like, that's the thing, you know, like there's lots of things you can't evaluate. And so it may cost you just as much in a way to evaluate the system as it would if you did it another way. So that those are really good questions that you have to ask yourself. So we've got, you know, the thing about cost, accuracy. Are you going to have data issues with, you know, storage, sensitivity, security, getting permission, doing this, all of those things. Another question that I like to ask is, how can you test a black box solution? I mean, we've talked, we have spoken about the one about translation to determine if it's functioning correctly and if it's functioning ethically. So how are you going to be able to determine that? How are you going to be able to determine if something is correct and if it's ethical to do what you did? So, I mean, let's look at the idea of getting images of people coming into your store and then evaluating them for what demographic they're in, so you can see who buys, you know, who's coming into your store and things like that. What are all the problems with that?
Well, we already talked about consent, right? Would that would come into play?
Oh yeah, consent. Consent is a big issue. What's hard about consent?
Getting people to understand what they're consenting to is a problem. Like a lot of the time you'll put up a checkbox that says, hey, you're consenting to this or that, but does the person who's checking the box actually understand what that means and what the implications are for them?
Yeah, really good point. It also comes down to, have you explained it well enough for people to understand? Like, I mean, everybody has this. You go to something where they're asking for your consent, and it's like page after page after page of legal speak. And most of the time, you just go to the end and click, yeah. But is that consent? You know, like, and they do this thing now where they actually have you, you have to actually go through the document to find that consent point where it's at the end where you can check the box. But everybody just flips through that. They're not timing it to see if it was realistic. Yeah, and it's exactly the terms and conditions. Everybody says that. Oh yeah, I accept that, because you just want whatever, and you don't want to spend your life reading all these documents. So the fact that they gave you a 10-page document to read meant that you certainly weren't going to understand what you just signed away. So you do have ethical problems because you can make it so that people don't understand. So, I mean, it's hard enough for people to understand exactly what it is, but you can also make it so that for sure they don't understand what it is. So, you know, there's obviously issues with getting consent. What other issues are there when you're using, you know, like, let's say, let's use this example system. We have a system where people are coming into the store, you're taking images of them, you're categorizing those images, and then you want to use that data for, I don't know, planning what you're going to do. What are all the possible problems that you can have functionally and ethically with that kind of scenario? Especially when you're using these products, when you're using a black box, where you're going there and saying, okay, Azure or Google or AWS had these facial recognition, they have object recognition. And you saw I gave the examples Monday of what they say they can do, that you can have, you know, this person is happy, their face is happy, they're smiling, they're, you know, female, they're whatever. What could be wrong with using those tools, or what could possibly, like, how do you know? How can you test to find out if using those tools will actually work correctly and whether it's ethical to use it that way? What could go wrong? Is there anything that could go wrong if you go and say, I'm going to get me some of those facial recognition algorithms that they have there. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to let it label it for me. And I'm going to use those labels to then calculate out who visited my store.
If you're trying to see like who's trying to like visit the store in that example, if you're going to compartmentalize people based on who they are, there could be bias based on, you know, if like two people walk into the store, are you going to categorize them as a couple or friends, or like, you know, or how are you going to categorize these people that are coming in?
Yeah, no, that we saw an example of that it's very hard to do those things, right? You're right. Two people come in and you have this, and it's like, yeah, Kiefer, he's got on the demographic side, struggle to understand why companies want them, when they could look at objective numerical data. Right. Okay. Yes, you're right that there's huge problems with ensuring that you get the proper idea of who's coming into your store or not. And when we look at demographics, actually you brought up the point about just looking at numerical data. Actually, there's problems with actually getting that data. People think if you go to the census and you can find out what the demographics are for a particular area. So let's say you have a store in downtown Guelph, and you go to StatsCan and you say, okay, what are the demographics of, you know, the Guelph area? People assume that data is really good and accurate. And it's funny because I was just reading, I just got a new book on democratizing data, and it's looking at, now this was looking at the American example, but it's very similar in Canada, about just how good the government is at getting all this data that we use all the time to base judgment on. And so we might get the demographic data and think, they actually they got it, they collected it correctly, that they had a good sample. Even for the census, they're finding that there's huge issues with doing it. And for when they do like household surveys, it's not working anymore. It was designed, it was designed in World War II to find out what was going on in manufacturing. And almost all the methods that they have are really outdated, and actually they are marginalizing minorities in all of this data, because a lot of times there's reasons why they don't collect that data from them. So yeah, if you're looking at, you know, you say, okay, I want to know, like, let's say I go to the census and I find out what the demographics are, and I want to see, am I getting those demographics? Are you going to be able to get that when you have issues like Jivan's comment about, oh, well, if they come in, you don't know whether two people coming in are, you know, is it a family coming in? Is it a couple? Is it friends? You know, what do you want to actually look at? And then if you think about functioning correctly, there's been lots of cases where those algorithms haven't worked very good for certain groups. Particularly, they haven't worked well. Sometimes they haven't worked well for women. They haven't worked well for people of color. They haven't worked well for a lot of different groups. So, you know, if you know, I agree that there, you know, why do people want to know this? Which is a good question. Why do you need to know this? What are you going to do with the data? Which is actually really good. So, you know, Kiefer's pointed out this really central question, right? People love collecting data about things, but what are they going to use it for? You know, so that's the ethical part. If you're collecting all this data, for what, right? But if you are collecting it, right, do you know you've done it correctly? And when you do black box things, all right, there is a problem. So let's say you realize you wanted, for some reason, you wanted to analyze, you know, what people are coming into your store. Let's say even just if we want to look at gender or age, or, you know, let's say just gender and age, if you want to do that by just looking at the images. How would you, and so you've decided, I'm doing this in the cloud. Oh, look at, there's a service on AWS or Azure that says it can do some of those things for me. What would you do before actually putting it into your system to ensure that it actually did do what it said it was doing? Right? Because like I said, I challenge you, go out there and find me, and I'll give you extra marks. If you could find me a paper that actually is by these services or the people in those services that tell you how they did it, what data they used it on, and exactly how they tested it, I will give anybody extra marks if they can find that. And I'm pretty sure, like, I really want that paper. Or papers, if you can find that. But for any of those AI type things like object recognition or facial recognition or anything like that. So I'm challenging you to that, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be next to impossible to find. So without that, right, what are you going to do? Your boss has told you, put that stuff in. How are you going to prove to yourself that you're actually getting something that's working correctly, doing what you think it's doing? How are you going to do the testing? I mean, obviously you're going to test, right? Everybody has to test. But how are you going to test it properly? When all of you have worked on systems you have to test, you've written a system, you want to test it, how are you going to test this? It's a black box, so you're just going to give it inputs and get outputs. So what are you going to do? Come on, I know someone out there knows how to do it. Anything.
I mean, making hypothesis about what it would, how it would respond to certain data, and then feeding it that data and seeing if it's correct and adjusting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing is when we were discussing on Monday, when I looked at some of those papers, the one thing that they found in studies where they actually had access to how they did it was if the testing or the training was balanced. So did you have a balanced set? So if you are going to be looking for being able to, let's say if you're looking for gender and age, well, then, you know, obviously you're going to put in all sorts of different ages, you know, like pictures of people at different ages, different genders, but you're also going to put in other things too, to see if, you know, like, does it matter if they're wearing glasses? Does it matter whether it's between winter and summer clothing? Does it matter if they're different ethnic or racial groups? All of those sorts of things. You have to create all those test cases. So yeah, and that's actually a good point that Warren's made about it being having a third party look at it. So yeah, obviously, as Carolyn said, you're going to go out there and you're going to go and try to find out, you know, like test it and find out what it does right and what it doesn't. But you're going to have to also make sure that your test set is really testing it. Yes, edge cases. And that Kiefer's mentioning about edge cases and making sure that when you feed that into the system, it can still do it. And that's obviously something that you have to do. The fact is that you have to make sure, like you have to think about the test sets, because you're hoping that the people who did this, you know, that created these algorithms that trained up these systems, gave them balanced data sets to train on, and then also tested where they went through, they gave it, you know, balanced testing where they went through all different things, and as Kiefer mentioned, did edge cases. So they made sure, do they get those? And the thing that's really important in all of this is to find out where it makes mistakes. Because sometimes when systems make mistakes, they're not dangerous, right? You know, like the cases where they do it, it's either so small or it's in something that, let's say you had something that was looking at ages, right? And you were saying that, you know, you were looking at something like baby, a young child, sort of older child, teenager, young adult, older adult, elderly. If you're looking at that, if a young child walks in and it says they're elderly, okay, that's a big mistake. That's it. The system isn't working very correctly. But if you have a young child and it says that they're a slightly older child, is that a bad mistake? It's not perfect, but it's not that far out of range. And so you might say, well, that error is acceptable in a way, like the system is close to getting that. And, you know, there's lots of, not just edge cases, but actually cases that are in between categories. A lot of times when you do categories, sometimes something looks like sort of both categories because the categories aren't really sharp. And so you have to look at where is it making mistakes and what mistake is it making? And so there's been lots of really embarrassing mistakes that these systems have made where they're completely wrong about what it is, and sometimes in an insulting way. So, and mostly that's because they have not given it balanced training, which means you have to give it balanced testing. So you have to find the edge cases, you have to find the in-between cases, you have to test across all of the expected inputs to the system. So, you know, you have to do all of that. And what's really important is what was mentioned is, can you get actually someone who is, you know, detached from the results? So a third party that will give you the testing results, and they don't have skin in the game. So in other words, if you've designed the system and you put this in, or your boss said put it in, you don't want your boss evaluating it, and to a certain extent, you don't want to evaluate it. You want somebody else, you know, a tester in your company that maybe has nothing to do with the project, or a third party that you hire to come in to do it, to certify what it does and what it doesn't do. So yeah, those are the things. And it's like, I've got this question here. Is it being correct, right, enough to be ethical? So if you go in and you find out, yeah, this system is pretty good at distinguishing people and putting them in different categories, let's say like the artificial ones that are what we refer to as race. Even if your system, so if you get one of these black box systems in the cloud and you do that and it's working pretty well, is that it? Is it ethical? Does that determine that it's ethical? Is it enough? So we've got, yeah, Kiefer saying that it's a lot more about purpose and correctness, right? Which is a good comment, because it's like, why are you doing any of this? Why are you using any of this? Yeah, and the thing is that, yeah, just because what you've tested, well, and that's the whole thing with testing, right? Is that you're seeing what the system looks like now, and especially with systems that claim that they're learning, right? So yes, it's a very good point. Isaac is pointing out that one of the things that they try to sell you on with these systems, if you look at the material that you can find on from any of these cloud platforms, they say it's continually learning, right? Now that means that it's changing, And so, yeah, you're going to have to keep testing it if you actually if you're using the system, their system, and you're putting it in there, you know, do you know when it's changed? Like that's the thing that I always find funny, is that they think this is all really good sales points. So they have two big sales points. One, you don't have to understand anything about machine learning to use these systems. You can be, you know, blissfully ignorant and still use these systems, which is very dangerous. But the other thing is, they say it's continually getting better, right? And the thing is, they never publish any of this, and I'm not even sure they tell you when it's been improved. Like, when do they do this every week? Do they don't. You know, like, when are they retraining? Almost all these methods, so if you look at the methods they claim to use, deep learning techniques, almost all the ones I know of, unless they're using something I don't know about, have to be retrained totally over again. They're not incremental learners. So it's not like, oh, we got some extra data and we threw that in there, now it's better. It usually means that the whole system has to be retrained, which is extremely costly, which means they're not doing it all the time. And why did they do it? Why did they retrain? Does that mean that there were errors in it, or inaccuracies that they were trying to smooth out? Just putting more data in does not necessarily mean the system will get better, right? If you're showing it stuff that it's already seen, you're showing it even more of a biased data set, doesn't get better, right? It's not magic. Just because you throw more data into it does not mean it gets better. So isn't it important to know when it changed, or if it changed, or anything like that? So yeah, it's a very good point that if you have systems changing over time, like they promote, doesn't it mean then you have to be continually testing? Or the answer you got 5 weeks ago is different from the answer you get today. Is that good, or is it bad? All right, so those are all things that you need to know. And where are you going to find those out? Once again, I'll challenge you to find out where on these systems you go to find out this information. When did it change? Why did they change it? Do they tell you how that improved it? Like, they just say improves. What does that mean? All right? Because they don't actually tell you how good it is anyways. They don't tell you where it made mistakes. If they don't tell you where it makes mistakes, then they're lying to you. Every system makes mistakes. You just have to know what kind of mistakes they make. So my last question, getting some good answers here. Last question. Okay, who's vulnerable with regards to these types of systems? And does the cloud make things better or worse? So who's vulnerable? So if you've got all these AI systems out there, black boxes that people are integrating into their applications, right? And remember, if you're integrating it, somebody else is too, right? So yeah, minorities usually, I mean, that would be the case, but in what aspect when you're talking about minorities? Because there's lots of different types of groups that we could be looking at. Right, actually, yeah, I just made a good point in that it's anybody that wasn't in the data set that was used to train the system. And so you have the problem that, let's say you're working with one of these facial recognition systems, and let's say you're a company in Africa. Do you actually think that these systems would be good for you to use, as opposed to if you're in the US and you're using them? Like, is there any way for you to find out that these systems are good for your application in Africa or Asia or wherever, as opposed to, and I don't know where, like, I'm assuming that for the most part, these systems are developed in the US. Does that matter? So would you be comfortable using these systems all over the world? You have a global app, or you're in Africa and you're doing this. Would you think, yeah, sure, it's the cloud, right? I can get at it, I can use it. But isn't that, there's, people would be skeptical saying, yeah, probably not. But then does that compromise the cloud in a way? Because the cloud is trying to appear to be ubiquitous, global, everywhere. But it obviously is made by people. Everything's made by people. So the frailties are based on the people. So is there a problem then when it goes on the cloud, as opposed to just being software that you buy from somebody and download onto your own server?
I think there's a bit of a misnomer there where Amazon's target audience is probably mostly based in Western countries. So when they do, say to their audience, we're a universal solution for the world, if you're reading that and their target audience and the majority of their audience is in the West reads that and goes, oh, I'm in the world, so this applies to me. So they probably don't really care about their audience that is in other parts of the world where their systems wouldn't apply to, because that they're not getting as much money from those industries.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because obviously this is based on money. Amazon does not do this as a public service, neither does Microsoft or Google. In fact, I had that article a couple of lectures ago about the fact that now they're saying Microsoft is actually seeing a huge return on their Azure service, even especially during the pandemic. AWS has been one of the biggest contributors of money to Amazon for a long time. Google's the only one that seems to be complaining about the amount of money their cloud is bringing them. But the thing is that these are money-making systems. And so they're going where they think their audience is. So yeah, there's a problem that these obviously aren't designed necessarily for the world. And I'm not just saying it's only the cloud ones. Almost all AI systems aren't designed for the world. They're almost all designed, well, a lot of them are designed in California, or, they're generally, they come out of the same sorts of shops. They don't have representative populations in all sorts of things, in all demographics. Yeah, they're definitely designed where they think they're going to make money. But that's the problem, is that if that's you, that's great. So they're designing the system for you and you give them money and everybody's happy. The thing is that there's a lot of people out there that don't fit what these systems were designed for. But they have a lot of the same uses or needs that the people it was designed for have. So you've got this problem that this looks like a really neat solution to, particularly with AI systems, which are very expensive to create, very expensive to train, very expensive to get all the data for. And anytime they sell a product saying you don't have to know how it works, you don't have to know anything about it, that makes me, I don't know. It makes me think that there's something wrong. You actually should want to teach your audience what this is about, instead of saying, don't worry, you don't have to understand this at all. Just use it. Trust me. Trust me. This will be great for you. So I think that when you look at some of these products, I think it's easier to see in the AI ones, because it's so easy to see the fact that they don't tell you how they work, so you don't know a lot about that. But I want you to think about, even with, I think the cloud systems are a little bit more forthright when they talk to you about how the systems work, how they actually architect the systems. But there's always some things that can be left out, and that's important when you're designing with all of these, to know what all those things are. So even just a trivial case would be, do you understand all the security that's in the system, right? And you don't want, I mean, people don't like to be told, oh yeah, it's secure, don't ask any questions, just trust us, it's secure. You wouldn't feel good about that. And yet we accept that about AI. It's like, I know you wouldn't understand the math behind that, so we're not going to tell you. It's the same thing when you talk about security. You wouldn't want someone fobbing this, you know, oh, don't worry, you would never understand it, but it's fantastic. If you're designing systems, you should understand how they work, every part of them. You should understand how they work. And the thing is that while some parts of the cloud are very well explained about what's out there, but also that's because people have tested them. So you didn't get everything from the platforms about the security. People went out there and tested it to find out if they were secure. It's the same thing with any of the products, whether it's security, whether it's AI, any kind of the different platforms that they put out there. Any of those things, you should be inquisitive about how they're doing what they say they're doing. So I think the thing about, does the cloud make it better or worse? I don't know if it's making it that much worse, but it does give you the impression that it's for everybody. And of course, it isn't. So you have to be very, I mean, it's almost all software is like that. We like to believe that we're creating software for everybody, but we're not. We generally are creating it for people like us or people in our societies. We don't look at all sorts of different other ideas that are out in the world. And when we talked about like the data, you know, issues with data, to a certain extent, we also have a very Western privileged view of data, who it belongs to, what it should be used for. Most people would be believe in open data, and everything should be open, everything should be free, there shouldn't be any restrictions. There's lots of societies where they don't actually believe that, and they have their reasons for it. So a lot of indigenous societies, these are usually societies where of people that have limited power, that they're at risk because they aren't they don't have very much power compared to other groups. And they have other concepts and other ideas, which are equally valid to look at and to try to appreciate. But there's lots of other theories, thinking, concepts that are out there in the world that aren't the same as ours. And so when we're designing software, and particularly when we put it in the cloud and say, hey, look at it, it's for everybody all over the world, we have to realize that, excuse me, we have to understand what the world is composed of. And there's lots of different types of people, different types of societies, different concepts, different thoughts that are out there. So when you're doing this, you have to ask questions. What's it actually, how has it been designed? Who designed it? Who did they design it for? And so when you look at some of the services for the cloud, a lot of the very technical ones about like storage or things like that might be well explained. But even with those, you should make sure you understand exactly what they're doing. And anything that you use, like a product like their AI or their image understanding or their text processing, you should understand it before you use it. So it's not that I'm saying you shouldn't use it, but you should understand what it's doing, and you should do testing. Don't believe them. Never, you know, like trust but verify. That's what your motto should be. Trust but verify. Yeah, they have good things out there, but make sure you know they're good. Okay, so I want you to just think about when you see things in the news about cloud systems or about, you know, systems where lots of data is being captured and things are done with it. Think about how you would test all of this to find out if it's correct, and think about how you would also test, is it ethical? Okay, so what we're going to be, let me stop sharing here. So you've got everything except the final exam. And so you've got all of that in the left to do in the course. And so got the marking will start Thursday, I believe. So get your A2s marked. I think almost everybody except for 4 people are signed up for a spot. So go get it graded. And then as soon as next week, I'm going to put up the spots so you can get A3 graded. And we'll get all of that so you can get all the different evaluation elements done as soon as possible. Okay, do we have any questions or last comments before we leave? Good. It was good, guys. You have some good points there. So that's great. I don't see anything else. What time is it? Oh, you got 3:30. So I think we're all getting tired here. So, okay, I will see everybody next week. Have a good rest of the week and a great weekend. And thanks to everybody for participating.